The quiet before the storm. The Sundancer slid smoothly through the starry void, its engines humming like a well-oiled machine. The journey had been long, as journeys often were in the far reaches of the galaxy. A crew of 3, each with their own history and purpose, moved in sync as they prepared for their next delivery. For Mur, Paint, and I, it was just another stop in the endless cycle of hauling goods across the stars. Yet, as the planet Shader Secundus came into view, a sense of unease gripped me. It was not the kind of place we usually visited. The communication had been brief, a request for us to drop off some crates and leave. There was no mention of cargo specifics, no friendly pleasantries, just a directive to deliver and get out. I checked the coordinates again. Everything seemed fine. Shader Secundus was an industrial planet on the edge of the Orion Arm, home to a series of mining colonies and some of the most resilient creatures I'd ever encountered. The Phylori, massive herd-based creatures who migrated across the planet's vast desert plains, were known for their long necks and imposing stature, much like giant camels, though far more alien in nature. It wasn't the sort of place I would expect to find high-stakes drama, but in this galaxy, everything had a way of surprising you. Mur, how's the approach looking? I asked, keeping my eyes on the planet ahead as I maneuvered the ship into a steady descent. Mur, my 8-tentacled companion, sat at the controls. His multi-eyed face remained locked on the console, his focus unyielding. Mur was a highly capable navigator, one of the best in the business. But there was something different about his demeanor today. His usually calm, unflappable nature was tinged with a subtle wariness. Approach is clear, gravity standard, and the landing site is mark, Mur replied, his voice as emotionless as always. But there was an odd twitch in one of his tentacles, a subconscious signal that something wasn't right. Good, I said, though my gut was telling me otherwise. Paint, the youngest of our crew but sharp as a needle, glanced up from her terminal. Her antennae twitched, a sign that she had picked up on the same feeling. Did you check the coordinates again? The message from the contact seemed off. Why do they want the delivery now and not later? I sighed, adjusting the ship's speed. Yeah, I checked. They said they needed it fast. Not sure why, but we've been paid up front, so it's a straightforward delivery. But Paint wasn't convinced. She stood up, walking to the front of the cockpit. There's no such thing as a straightforward delivery on Shader Secundus. That planet is a hotspot for tensions between the mining colonies, and they've got their own security forces. Never mind the Phylori. If they're asking for our help, there's more to it. I couldn't argue with her logic. The Phylori had their own way of doing things, self-sufficient, nomadic, and unpredictable. They were often caught in the crossfire of power struggles between the various mining syndicates and corporate interests. I had no doubt that the crew we were meeting had ties to one of those factions. The planet was too remote to be a neutral party in this galaxy's endless conflict. As we descended into the atmosphere, the towering structures of the mining city became visible, an industrial behemoth of rusted metal and towering silos. The smell of dust and burning fuel permeated the air as we touched down on the landing pad. We were greeted by a group of armed individuals, none of whom looked like they belonged to a friendly faction. They were all humanoid, but their features were far from comforting. Scarred faces, harsh eyes, and worn armor that had seen far too many battles. They didn't speak a word as they began unloading the crates from our ship, their eyes scanning us with a practiced wariness. This wasn't just any delivery. This was a deal that carried weight, heavy weight. I motioned to Mur and Paint to follow me, keeping a close eye on our surroundings. This wasn't a place to be caught off guard. As we moved toward the cargo unloading area, I noticed something strange about the crates we had been tasked with transporting. They were tightly sealed, and the markings on the side were indecipherable to me. Not that I was an expert in alien languages, but I had seen enough cargo containers to know when something didn't feel right. Paint, take a look at these markings, I said quietly, nodding toward the crates. Do these look like the usual stock we move? She tilted her head, her antennae flicking as she studied the crates closely. "No, these are from an unknown source," she murmured. "Something's off, boss." Before I could respond, a loud voice interrupted us. "That's enough. Move along. The transaction is nearly complete," said the leader of the group of armed men. His voice was gruff, and there was a sharp edge to it that suggested we were no longer just here to make a delivery. He stepped forward, his hand brushing the side of a strange device strapped to his chest. "A weapon, no doubt. Is everything ready?" I asked, trying to keep my cool. I was starting to feel the tension rise, and I had no idea what kind of game we were getting pulled into. The man's lips curled into a slight smile, but there was no warmth in it. "Ready enough. But I'll warn you, you won't get paid until everything is delivered as instructed." Paint took a step forward, her gaze sharp. "We've done what we were hired to do. You don't get to change the terms now." The leader's smile faded, and he glanced over at one of his companions. "The terms don't change, but the situation has. We have need of more than just delivery, my friends. I suggest you remain cooperative." I could feel the shift in the air. The tension was palpable. This wasn't just about cargo anymore. This was about something much larger, something that would likely draw us deeper into the galaxy's tangled web of conflict. The threat in the air was unmistakable. And just like that, I knew. This delivery would not be simple. Not by a long shot. Unseen dangers. The hum of the ship's engine faded as we disembarked, stepping onto the gritty landing pad that seemed to be permanently etched with dust and the remnants of countless cargo hauls. Shader Secundus was a planet that thrived on trade, but not the kind of trade that made one feel safe. Here, nothing was given without a price, and everything had a hidden cost. It was a land of brutal economy and brutal survival, and today we were walking into the middle of it. The leader of the armed group led us deeper into the compound, past shipping containers and stacks of unused machinery. The walls were adorned with mismatched signs, some written in languages I didn't recognize, others in a tongue that was all too familiar, human. It was clear that this was a place where borders between species blurred, and even the most basic rules of civility could be bent or broken. "Come along, and make it quick. We don't have all day," the leader snapped, his sharp voice slicing through the tension in the air. I glanced at Mur, who was trailing behind us, his eyes scanning every crevice of the compound. His tentacles twitched nervously, something I rarely saw from him. The layout of the compound was erratic. No clear rhyme or reason to the arrangement of buildings. It was as if the structures had been hastily constructed, then left to fall into disrepair as the years wore on. Some buildings were half-collapsed, their skeletal remains jutting into the sky like monuments to a forgotten past. Others were more solid but heavily fortified, with blaster turrets perched on the rooftops like sentinels. We passed through a long hallway lined with metal doors. Some were shut tight, others slightly ajar. It was a strange place for a delivery. No welcome signs, no warm greetings, just a cold, utilitarian atmosphere that made my skin prickle. This wasn't a business deal. It was a transaction with a darker undertone. I didn't know exactly what was going on, but I could feel it. The air was thick with unease, and I wasn't the only one who noticed. "Stay close," Paint whispered, her voice low but firm. She'd always had a keen sense for trouble, and I trusted her instincts more than my own at times. As we made our way deeper into the compound, my hand subconsciously drifted to the sidearm holstered at my waist. I wasn't expecting trouble, but I wasn't about to walk into a situation unprepared. We were led into a dimly lit room with high reinforced walls. The lights flickered above us, casting erratic shadows on the cold metal floor. There were more guards here, all armed and standing at attention, but they didn't look like they were expecting us. Instead, their attention seemed focused on something else, something I couldn't see. One of the guards, a broad-shouldered alien with jagged markings along his arms, stepped forward. "Is this the human shipment?" he asked, his voice carrying a deep, guttural growl. There was something unsettling about the way he said it, like he was almost expecting us to answer with something else, something more. "This is the shipment," I replied firmly. "As requested. Now where's the buyer?" The guard studied me for a moment, his gaze unblinking. Finally, he motioned toward a large reinforced door on the far side of the room. "In there. But be prepared. The terms have changed." He said the words as though they were a warning, and I could sense a subtle shift in the air. We walked toward the door, Paint and Mur flanking me. The guard didn't move to stop us, but I could feel his eyes burning into our backs. Something was wrong. It wasn't just the way the guards were acting. It wasn't just the atmosphere of the compound. There was something in the crates we were delivering, something that didn't fit with the story we'd been told. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a large, sterile room. The walls were lined with terminals, blinking lights, and screens filled with static. At the far end of the room stood a tall figure, silhouetted against the dim light. He was humanoid in shape, but covered in intricate patterns of armor, his face obscured by a helmet. I couldn't tell who he was, but the posture, the way he held himself, it screamed authority. "Welcome," the figure said, his voice mechanical, hollow. I trust the journey was pleasant. I didn't trust anything about this situation, but I forced myself to keep calm. It was fine. "Now where's the payment?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. We weren't in a position to haggle, not with all the armed guards around us. We had no choice but to go along with their demands for now. The figure chuckled, the sound low and metallic, like it was coming from deep within his chest. "Payment? Oh, you'll get your payment. Don't worry about that. But first, you need to understand what's really at stake here." I narrowed my eyes, trying to make sense of his words. What was he talking about? Payment. This wasn't a typical trade. "Let me explain," the figure continued, his voice taking on a cold, detached tone. "Those crates you've been hauling around, what you think is just a simple delivery of goods, contain something much more valuable. They contain the key to a war." I blinked, unsure if I had heard him correctly. "A war?" I repeated. "What kind of war?" He took a step forward, and I could see the glint of something dangerous in his eyes, even through the helmet's visor. "The kind of war that will determine who controls the galaxy. What you have been delivering, my dear human, is not just cargo. It's the last piece in a puzzle that has been building for centuries." I stood frozen, feeling the weight of his words settle on my chest like a heavy stone. This was no ordinary delivery. We were in the middle of something much bigger than we had imagined. And the galaxy, our entire universe, was about to change forever. "I suggest you stay close," the figure said, a smile creeping into his voice, though it was hidden by the armor. "Because once you're involved, there's no going back." The true cost. The figure in front of us, still hidden behind the sleek, imposing armor, took a deliberate step back. There was something in his stance that told me he had seen humans react to information like this before. Fear, confusion, even defiance, but always in a predictable way. What he was about to reveal wouldn't be something we could walk away from easily. The very air around us seemed to grow heavier, as though the walls themselves were listening in on this conversation. "You've brought much more than mere cargo, human," the armored figure continued, his voice calm but filled with an eerie finality. "In those crates, you've delivered the seed of a war that could tear the galaxy apart. And in your hands lies the power to determine the outcome." I blinked, trying to process what he was saying. My eyes flicked over to Paint and Mur, who seemed just as lost as I was. We were just trying to do our job, make the delivery, and move on. But somehow we had become entangled in something far greater than ourselves. "What are you talking about?" I asked, trying to steady my voice. "We're just here to deliver some goods. What's in those crates?" The figure's laugh echoed through the room, harsh and mechanical, as though the sound came from deep within a cavern. "Ah, simple as always, aren't you? Let me put it this way. What you have delivered is not a shipment of tools, weapons, or resources. Those crates contained something far more valuable, an ancient artifact, one that could change the balance of power across the entire galaxy. Paint's eyes narrowed, and I could tell she was trying to piece it all together. An artifact? From where? Who is it for? The figure raised a hand as if to silence us, his fingers clicking with the precision of a machine. That, he said, is none of your concern. What matters now is that you understand the danger. You've brought this to a place where it will be used to bring about a conflict on a scale never before seen. War, destruction, and chaos will reign, unless you do something about it. I glanced over at Mur, who was staring down at the floor, his tentacles twitching nervously. I could tell he was thinking the same thing I was. What could we possibly do? We were just a crew, just a simple delivery team. None of us were soldiers. None of us were trained for galactic warfare. But we were in deep now, and running away wasn't an option. So, what's the plan? I asked, my voice flat. You're telling us that we've just walked into a situation we can't escape from. How do we fix this? The figure's helmet tilted slightly as if considering my question. Then slowly, he walked toward a large console at the far end of the room. He pressed a button, and a holographic projection flickered to life in front of us. It was a map of the galaxy, with various points marked in bright red, indicating areas of strategic importance. There were planets we recognized, stations we passed by, and most alarmingly, places we'd never heard of before. This is what you've unleashed, the figure said, pointing toward one particular region of the map, an area surrounded by dense red markers. This artifact, the one you've been delivering, was created centuries ago by a lost civilization. It's called the Core, and it has the power to manipulate space-time. When activated, it can bend the very fabric of reality, making it possible to alter the course of entire star systems. With it, anyone who holds it can shift the fate of the galaxy. Wait a minute, I interrupted, a knot tightening in my stomach. You're telling me we're holding something that can warp space-time? That sounds like something out of a legend. The figure paused, and for the first time, I thought I saw a flicker of genuine emotion in his posture. It's not just a legend. This is real. And it's far more dangerous than you can imagine. Who are you? Paint asked, her voice sharp, but I could hear the suspicion in it. Why are you involved in all this? And why don't you want us to tell anyone about it? The figure's helmet remained unreadable, but his tone shifted, a touch colder now. Because there are those out there who would do anything to use this artifact for their own gain. There are factions, some well-known, some hidden in the deepest corners of the galaxy, that are already mobilizing for war. And they will stop at nothing to control the Core. What you have brought here has already set events in motion. There's no turning back. A heavy silence fell over the room as the reality of the situation sank in. My mind raced as I tried to process everything. This was bigger than just a job, bigger than us. The weight of the galaxy's fate seemed to rest on our shoulders, and we didn't even know how to fix it. So what now? Mur asked, his voice trembling slightly. What do we do with it? The figure turned away from the map and walked toward a large crate, which was half open. He gestured to it, and I could see the glint of something inside. Something ancient, something powerful. The artifact, no doubt. You'll deliver it to the proper authorities, the figure said. You'll ensure that it never falls into the wrong hands. But first, you need to understand the risks. There are others out there, very dangerous others, who would kill for this. The moment you leave this room, you'll be a target. The artifact is only one part of a much larger scheme. And you're already part of it. The figure's words hit us like a wave. The idea that we were now wrapped up in a galactic conspiracy, with a weapon that could alter reality itself, was almost too much to bear. But we didn't have time to dwell on it. There was no turning back now. What's the plan? I asked again, my voice steadier now, though I could feel my hands begin to sweat. We have to keep moving, the figure said. There's no time to waste. The ship is ready. You'll take the artifact to the coordinates I give you. The rest is up to you. But know this, every decision you make from this point forward will affect the future of every living being in the galaxy." With that, he turned toward the door and motioned for us to follow. There was no more time for hesitation. We had a mission now, whether we wanted it or not, and the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance.